Good morning, everyone. My name is Wu Hanshi. Today I want to talk about the art of editing in the age of convergence, Chapter 3, the editing process. Good editing depends on exercise of good judgment, so the key point for editor is to make the right decision. First, about copy editor. Copy editor are the last line of defense before a newspaper goes to press. Unlike reporter often receive bylines, copy editor's name seldom appear in print. Also, copy desk is the heart of newspaper, and the copy editor should always keep sentence short. That's what we always emphasize. Copy editors are also managers, and the best ones are leaders. Manager is to maintain standards, while leader inspire others. So few choose to be managed, most design to be led. The value of copy editors. Copy editors offer greater opportunity for growth of newspaper, and they have chance to climb to the top of the company's hierarchies. They transform mediocre articles into epics. Their process is like probe, question, authentic, and exercise their power of deductions. So copy editor must collect various facts and clues. Copy editors have feel for copy flow and production requirements because these are their daily routines. Newspapers pay copy editors more than reporters because copy editors are more difficult to find than reporters. This is what nowadays many journalism schools and departments realize and focus on. So what makes a good copy editor? There are many facts to be considered. I just pick up some typical points to list, like professional knowledge, love for writing, ability, skills, good sense, interest, and be skeptical and can handle people, a clear version of the publication's purpose, and a willingness to work anonymously behind a desk. Correspondingly, there are some suggestions for those who want to be a good copy editors. Stay informed. Join American Copy Editors Societies because this could provide more sources and references. And compare headlines with others. Learn to write effective web headline. Notice information and details. Keep notes, ask for feedback, and organize what you learn. So what editors do? This is typical staff organization of a metropolitan daily newspaper. These are common positions. These show clear relation between publishers and editors. In the age of web, as news break, editors' roles are evolving. As news break, it posts first to web, then repackaged for print. Study shows that most web servers are led to a story from search engines like Google and Yahoo. So SEO headlines are important because they are optimized according to search engine. Also, other factors like photos, audio or video clips, chart, maps, and other graphics are requested on the web. Due to emergence of citizen journalism, new job titles appear. Community engagement editor is someone whose jobs involve serving as a liaison to the public and serving as the public advocate within the newsroom. Interactive copy editing desk shows that newspapers recognize the increased importance of the web in its business model. Traditionally, copy editors contribute to print. This is an example of copy flow through a newspaper news department. So from reporter to copy editor or assistant, then to copy desk chef, and then to copy editor, and back to copy desk chef. Editing process. First, read the story. Second, editing it thoroughly. Third, reread the story. In the past, editors often printed out stories and used traditional editing symbols when marketing the paper copy, but most editing is now done on computers. This is an illustration of editing process. Over-editing is quite common now. Too many editors think they are better than those submitting copy to the desk. So they make unnecessary changes in clear, accurate copy just to put it in a form they believe is superior. This would disrupt the rhythm and continuity of the copy. Actually, each change in copy must be well justified. Stories typically need only a bit of polish and clarifications. Over-editing may take side effects to stories. The 3 R's of copy editing are read-centered, readable, and right. Read-centered is to focus on what the audience wants and needs. If editors make the story new for readers, readers will be attracted easily. The readable asks editors to make sure that stories are clear and concise. Besides, editors should consider whether the stories are accurate, objective, legal, ethical, tasteful, and sensitive. This is an example of edited copy. Editors make changes in paper, manuscripts, or on printouts of stories that reside in computers. In modern newsroom, this change usually are transferred to computerized version of the story before the story is typeset. Few newspaper and magazines still have compositors who set type directly from the manuscripts. These are copy editing symbols. They are casual, marked, and easy to understand. When doing proofreading is to make correction after the copy has been typeset. This is to mark minor change on page proofs before those pages are sent to the plate-making department. Also use page proofs to make minor change in page between editions. These are standard proofreading symbols. They are quite professional. In the proofreading stage, editors check over the page one last time before sending them off to the printing department. A proof is a copy of the complete page, ready to print except for any last-minute corrections. This is informal, a newspaper method of making proofs, and this is formal method of marking proofs. So what's the difference between proofreading and copy editing? The main difference is that the proofreading stage is not the time to continue editing or rewriting except in case of emergency. When closer to deadline, minor errors tend to be overlooked. Here's the checklist. The editor should check the story's headline or titles, layouts, captions, blurbs, and text. Then it's Q&A sections. Copy editors would publish their names in print, which are bylines, true or false. 廖子飞. Yes, because the bylines are often published by reporters, and the copy editors their names seldom appear in print. What are 3 R's of copy editing? 韩可欣. Yes. In the proofreading stage, editors cannot continue editing or rewriting except in case of emergency. True or false? 李桃. Yes. That's all about the presentation. Thank you.
Will you go ahead and leave your PowerPoint up? I want to go to a couple slides, so just leave it like that. It'll be fine. I'll turn it off. Yeah, I'll turn it off. Thank you. I just want to go back real quick to a couple of her slides to explain a couple of things. So I'm going to go back a ways. By the way, with the proofreading, let me just say, add to that, everything she said was correct. It'll make some difference whether or not you're working on a daily newspaper or weekly newspaper or a book. If you're working on a book, you could afford to make some changes. If you're copy editing, if you're proofreading the book, but even then, your copy editing should be done in a manuscript, and your proofreading of the when they're actually ready to go to press, basically. So you're still hopefully have done your copy editing already. So there should not be a lot of changes there either. But in a book publishing process, that's one reason why sometimes it's 6 months before a book comes out. That's 2 chapters from and a new book came out that I wrote last week, but we finished that. I finished the writing in December. And so almost not quite 6 months, more like 5 months, I guess, in that case. But I had to wrap it up in the middle of December, and it came out in the middle of May. So anyway, 5 months anyway, by the time I finished writing, and they actually published it. So they have some time to do some extra things that you can't do with the daily newspaper. So daily newspaper, you're not going to do much in the proofreading phase. Headlines, captions, as I mentioned. The last thing you want to change is the text. And that would be, again, only emergency situation where somebody's really screwed it up. And it's an important story. The more important the story, the more you're going to have freedom to make some changes, but you don't want to have to do that if you can help it. Oops, I'm going the wrong direction, I think. Now maybe I should turn this off and just go to the PowerPoint itself. Where am I? Lost my mouse. There we are. Okay, I want to talk about the organization chart a second. Before we go to the next presentation. Okay, so she showed the organization chart. Let me get this out of the way. The organization is so different from newspaper to newspaper. This is almost unnecessary or unuseful. There are 10,000 newspapers in America. I would say about 9,900 of them do not have this organization. This is the organization for the big metropolitan newspapers. And so you're talking about maybe 100 newspapers have an organization something like this. And even then, the function shown on this organization chart is very complicated, and this does not represent it very well. And let me explain why it's problematic. I mentioned in my class that managing editors or their assistants, as the case might be, are the ones that oversee the content editors. It's not the copy chief. It's not the other word for a copy desk chief is news editor. The news editor does not oversee the work of the content editors in their dealing with reporters. So it's the content editors, as I went through on Monday, that are going to directly work with the reporters, tell them if they think their story's ready to go, whether they have to ask some more questions, interview some more people, so forth. So the content editors are kind of close to the front lines, along with the reporters. The copy desk chief does not have responsibility for that function. And yet this organization chart suggests it does. So why did they get confused? Why did they make an organization chart that says, here's the copy desk chief, and its line is coming down here to rim editors. That's okay, I'll come back and explain that. Design desk, yeah, that's okay. But now it says that the copy desk chief has responsibility for all these content editors. only very loosely. And yet there's no direct line from the assistant managing editor. So this is not really accurate. I don't know of any newspaper where the copy desk chief has direct responsibility over the content editors in the reporting process. So why did they confuse this? Well, it used to be, let's go back up here to where it says room editors. It used to be that you literally have a desk set up kind of like these front desks here, where kind of a half, kind of like a horseshoe, maybe a little bit more extended. And in the center was your copy desk chief. Around him were maybe 10, up to 10 copy editors. And the copy desk and the copy editors, the copy desk chief and the copy editors handled all the copy editing for the entire newspaper. Everything was circled around, and so their job was very clear. They did copy editing. They also did design, that sort of work, design, headlining, so forth. That was their job. But as newspapers got bigger, and again, you're talking about maybe 100 out of 10,000 newspapers in America, the big metropolitan newspapers. So when you start looking at newspapers that have, in fact, I started thinking about it yesterday, kind of somewhat proportional. There are a lot of even daily newspapers in America that only have 5,000 circulation. The newspaper I was at had 50,000 circulation and 50 newsroom employees. The Washington Post now has its circulation has dropped in half over the last 10 years, so it has about 540,000 circulation, so about 10 times as much as the newspaper I was at. It has 10 times as many newsroom employees. We have over 500 employees working in the newsroom. How can you even envision a copy desk handling the work of 500 people? It's pretty much impossible, but you're kind of seeing a proportion. So if you have 50,000, you have 50 employees. If you have 500,000 circulation, you have 500 employees. If you have 5,000 circulation, you're probably getting it done about five employees. You're not going to see an organization like this if you have 5 employees putting out a small 5,000 circulation daily newspaper. You're going to have a lot of people wearing lots of hats and doing lots of work. So this only relates to those 100, maybe a little more than 100 newspapers that are big metropolitan newspapers. And so you're talking the Chicago and New York and Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles and San Francisco and Seattle, so forth. So coming back to this. So it doesn't make sense when you have that big of an organization for everybody to send their stuff, even electronically, to the copy desk chief and have all the copy editors working with him directly with whatever story happens to come up. So about 10 years ago, the same book talked about this trend happening. The trend was, let's split up the copy editors and have them work with the content editors. So they're more of a team. And the copy editors become specialized. They understand the work of the city editor if they're on the city editor's team. They understand the work of the state editor if they're the state editor's team. They understand the work of the national editor if they're the national editor's team. And they know those reporters, by the way. They get to know them. They get to know their personality. They get to know their weaknesses in their writing. And so they can work better as a team if they are assigned to the content editors. So now this changes the organization chart in a way that they have not depicted it here, because it's hard to depict. These copy editors really kind of have 2 bosses. They're working directly with the content editor, so the content editor can start giving them some idea of which are the most important stories from his perspective. So now they never had that relationship before. So when they only were up here, all these other content editors were sitting in all the stories, and they had very little input as far as what's important, what's not important. And so now the copy editors that are assigned to the content editors have this extra input from the content editors, and that's a good thing, to know what they think is important and not important. However, the copy editor chief is the one who assigns pages. And so he will tell, say, the national editor, in today's paper you have 10 pages, and here they may go ahead and send them to them electronically so they can see they're 10 pages, but they're half filled with ads. So we really only have 5 pages of content because the 10 pages are half ads, and they leave room for half the pages to be filled with stories. So now the national editor, like I said, can give some input to the copy editor assigned to him, but the copy editor still, his real boss, the final say for the copy editor is really the copy desk chief, just as it used to be when he sat around the rim. That's his boss. And that's the one who could probably get him fired if he doesn't do a good job. It's not the content editor, it's the copy desk chief. And so they're trying to show that there's a direct relationship between the copy desk chief and this operation down here. But the copy desk chief does not have any authority over the content editor when it comes to content. So it's deceiving. And even when they go back, and the same book goes back, and it tells you the function. Let's go back here to their functions here. So the reporter does a story, and who does it go to? Does it go to the copy desk? No. It goes to the in this case, the example is city editor. City editor is a content editor. So the copy editor, or excuse me, the city editor edits the story, returns the reporter for changes, additional detail, all the things I talked about in Monday's lecture. The content editor oversees the work of the reporter. The copy desk has no responsibility for that. That's the content editor. So, but when he's done, he does. Now this is going to be questionable whether this is even true, because if the copy editors have been assigned to work with the content editor, at this point they may kind of skip over the copy desk. This says the copy desk will decide on the placement of the story in the newspaper, prepares page dummy that determines the story's length and setting and headline size. No, that's not going to happen. This is not true. You don't have that one copy desk chief in the New York Times deciding how big the headlines are going to be and so forth. No, not going to happen. But he does decide which pages the national desk will have, or the city desk will have. That much he does do. But he'll hand it off to the copy editor, and the copy editor will then decide, in conjunction with the content editor, okay, which ones do we want to, which stories do we want to emphasize? Is this one we can cut? We don't have room in this page. We've got to fit these stories in at least 10 pages or whatever. So, and so it'd actually be the copy editor deciding where the stories would go. The content editor the copy editor who's working with in this organization that I showed you, that again is not representative of all newspapers, will work with the content editor in deciding which ones to emphasize, which ones they can cut because they don't have enough room, which one maybe they can hold. They just hold a story. They don't have room for it. This one could wait till tomorrow. Let's hold the story. So now the copy editor is working more in conjunction with the content editor than ever before. And so he, like I said, in a way has two bosses. But this is giving way too much credit to the copy desk chief. There's absolutely no way he can do all this, what it describes here. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. It also comes back and says every page goes back to the copy desk chief to review. In other words, to do a final review, kind of not really proofreading, although it may happen as a proofreading. It may happen before it actually goes that far. But again, this organization we're seeing is with the top 100 newspapers, with over 100 employees, which means they have lots of pages. They have lots of the copy editor. The copy desk chief cannot do everything it says he's going to do here. Not going to happen. Even in the newspaper I was at, we had 10 copy editors. We had 50 people in the newsroom, 10 copy editors. The news editor, or the copy desk chief, news editor is easier to say, and it's representative. The reason why he's called news editor is that he does decide which pages go to which content. And so in that sense, he is controlling the news in a very general way. We're going to assign these pages to the Metro News, these pages to the national news, these pages to the state news, whatever. He controls the news in that way, but he does not go into more detail than that. And anyway, so what I was starting to say, it also involves the front page meeting. So in our 50-person newsroom, I was the wire editor, so we didn't really have a national editor. So in essence, I was the national editor as the wire editor. We didn't have any national reporters. Therefore, we had no, so I didn't carry the title of national editor. Our reporters were Associated Press and Reuters and New York Times and so forth. We used their stories for national and international news. And so around 5 o'clock in the evening, we're just really getting going into the morning newspaper, with a paper that's going to come out in the morning, which is almost all daily newspapers come out in the morning. So they have all night to prepare it. They get all the news of the day, so and people like to read the newspaper over breakfast. And so we want that newspaper on their front step so they can get out of bed, go get their newspaper, sit down with their coffee, and read the newspaper before they go to work. So that's the design of a morning newspaper. There used to be afternoon newspapers, and they have, there might be one or two in America left, but not very many. They're almost all morning newspapers now. And so the copy editors don't even come in until late afternoon because they stay there until after midnight. So their shift, the reporters may come in early in the morning if they have news they need to do early. Their schedule is more flexible. They may have night meetings, they may have morning meetings, they may have all sorts of things. So the reporters have to be flexible. The copy editors come in no sooner than 3 in the afternoon, probably 4 in the afternoon. By 5, the Metro editor has already knew what the top stories were going to be. He's been there a little bit longer. The content editor comes in before the copy editors. So he's been working with the reporters. Maybe he came in at noon or something to work with the reporters, see what was going on. And so by about 5 o'clock, he knows which are his top stories. The sports editor would have come in a little bit early too, but sports very rarely has a front page story, so he may not even participate in the front page meeting. So typically the news editor, who will assign out stories, and in my case, the wire editor would go in, the Metro editor would go in, the photo editor would come in with his best photos. In our case, both the managing editor and the executive editors both participated in the front page meeting. And we all basically told them what our top stories were, what we felt like might be worthy of the front page. And we'd debate that a little bit, and the executive editor would make the decision. It was not a democracy. The executive editor, in our case, would, if he was there, if he wasn't there, then the managing editor would make the decision, okay, we're going to take 6, we didn't design like the Star, broadsheet page, so big page, 6 stories to the front page, 6 stories. And so we had to decide what were the 6 top stories, and then also 3 pluggers across the top to promote stories inside. What are going to be the pluggers at the top, and so forth. So that would take at least 30 minutes or so to do the front page. Then we'd come out, and the news editor would start assigning out pages, what will be on each page of the newspaper. So it's in that process, what I was going to get to was that our news editor very rarely he didn't look at the proofs usually. Our even with this relatively smaller organization of 50 people, our copy desk chief did not have time to look at all the pages. He may have been designing the front page. We didn't have a design editor. The first year there, we had a design editor who did front pages. But as of, I think, the second year I was there, I guess they decided to save money and have the copy editor do the front page. So I did the front page sometimes. But I think typically actually the copy desk chief became the lead designer. And so he would do the front page almost every night. That kept him busy. He assigned out the pages. He did some other pages too. And so basically the rule was every editor needs an editor. So when you're done with your page, they'll send you a proof, show your proof to another one of the copy editors, and have them go over your proof and make sure that you haven't misspelled words and headlines and stuff like that. Very quick, fairly superficial proofing of the page, and it was not necessarily the copy desk chief at all who did it. Just one of the other copy editors to lay a second set of eyes on that page to make sure you didn't do something stupid. If he didn't have time in a 50-person newsroom, I can guarantee that copy desk chief in the New York Times with 500 people is not looking at every page. He does not have time. If he's going to take this function of looking at all the pages at the last stage, then he's not going to do very much at this stage. I mean, he's got to choose one or the other. He can't do both. Every newspaper is going to be organized somewhat differently, and so this, again, this organization chart, first off, it's confusing, and it doesn't tell the whole story. But secondly, even if it did, even if it was perfect, it would represent no more than 100 out of 10,000 newspapers in America. So the textbooks and professors very frequently give emphasis to the biggest newspapers, but they're a minority of newspapers. They're a minority of journalistic work in America and in most countries. But definitely in America, like I said, there's 10,000 newspapers, and that organization chart might fit 100 of them. So it's not very accurate. It's most important to understand, and even it's most important to understand the sequence. This is more important, not quite accurate either, but more important than the other organization chart. But even this, you have to understand, the smaller you get, if you're at a 5,000 circulation daily newspaper and you've got 5 or 6 or 7 employees, well, yeah, you're going to be wearing lots of different hats. And that's one reason why I liked, my preferred job was not at the daily newspaper. Probably the one I enjoyed the most, I was the editor and publisher of 3 newspapers, actually 4 newspapers. 3 when I started and 4 after we bought another newspaper out. And so I wrote a lot of the front page stories. I worked with advertising. I did all the editing myself. I did look at every story. I did edit every story in the newspaper because we didn't have a huge newspaper. So I also took a lot of the photos. I did a lot of the stuff. I wore lots of hats, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoy that kind of work more than getting stuck behind a desk and just doing the same thing every day. And so it's a very, very different function. I had much more involvement in every stage of the newspaper by being, the editor and publisher of a weekly newspaper, but 4 of them, so I still had lots of work. But some of our stories would go in all 4 of the newspapers. So we'd have some unique stories, some we might just change their position. So a story about the neighboring city would be on their front page and might be in our page 10 on the central city. So we're talking about 3 cities, 4 publications in that area altogether. And so we changed the front page, but a lot of the stories would be someplace in each of those versions of the newspaper, if not the front page. Okay, let's go ahead with the next, where are you? Let's go ahead with the next, there he is, presentation. Okay. I think I'm going to put the box back in there. You're a little bit taller. This can be a little bit higher. Okay, yeah, right in there. So you're going to go to that view, and we'll turn on the camera. Let's see, I guess it's already going someplace. I just need to, oh, there it is down there. Okay, let's go back to here. I need to, stretch the box out.
Hello everyone. Today my topic is the editor and the audience. These are our contents today. Good editors need to listen to their readers and viewers. In the past, there were few ways for editors to listen to their audience. The only way news consumers could participate was to write a letter to editor or call a local television station, a news desk to comment or complain. Now, many editors realize that the media landscape has changed and so they are trying to adjust. Many newspapers now print the email address of reporters. Internet site phones and chat rooms provide a good opportunity to engage in dialogue with readers and viewers. In information age, the main question is how the information will be consumed. No media is doing a good job of satisfying the public's thirst for information. Because no one media has all the technological advantages. Today, newspaper, television, and the internet are evolving into a new infomedium that combines the best attributes of them all. Wise young journalists today should therefore view themselves not as print journalists, online journalists, or broadcasters, but as information providers equipped to provide news and other messages in whatever form the audience desires. To be a good editor, you first need to know what your audience is interested in. Research tells editors much about how their audience consume news. Here are some highlights from recent research studies of newspaper, radio, television, and online audience. News consumers expect news, whether it is national, state, regional, or local, while editors call hard news or late-breaking development is most important. Consumers want information about health, science, technology, diet, nutrition, and similar subjects, but will figure out for themselves how to cope with these problems. Reporters don't need to tell them. Newspapers should provide the important details readers don't get from television news. But remember, readers are short of time. Reporters should do a better job of covering the news subject of major interest, business news, health, consumerism, science, technology, school and education, family, children, and religion. The most important factor in the relationship between media and the consumers is credibility. In a telephone interview of Urban and the Associate of Saran, the public expressed constant and consistent appeals for fairness and even-handedness in news coverage. Major findings of the study are the public sees too much factual errors and spelling or grammar mistakes in newspaper. More than a third of readers say that they see mistakes more than once a week, and 21% reported seeing them almost daily. This may because the deadline renewals have led many newspaper companies to cut staffing, particularly on corp desk, where such mistakes are supposed to be detected and corrected. The public believe that newspaper and television just excessively cover sensational stories because they are exciting and sell papers or drive ratings. More than 80% of Americans believe that sensational stories get lots of news coverage simply because they are exciting, not because they are important. Further, 78% believe that the media are biased. This may due to the competition among media choice and excessively cover sensational story can attract more audience, and more audience translate into more advertisers. Another finding is the public suspect that the point of view and the bias of journalists influence what stories are covered and how they are covered. Like this picture, the standpoint of reporters can overshadow the story itself. Scandals involving prominent media personalities are all too frequent, and many of them involve fabrication of information, sloppy reporting, and disregard for the public they serve. For example, if the media industries are changing, so are the lives of media consumers. The U.S. Census and other data reveal much about changing lifestyles. Both spouses are working in more families, and there are more single-parent households. The number of people choosing to remain single also is increasing, contributing to a rapid increase in households. Leisure time is shrinking, and media use is a leisure time activity. More players, direct meal, special interest magazines, and an increasing number of television channels are competing for the decreasing amount of time. All this puts pressure on editors to know and understand their audience, and they need to participate actively in a community to know what people are talking about and which story will interest them. And these are questions. Which of the following action does not directly damage the credibility of the media? Right answer is B. The keyword is directly. Cut staffing may lead to increased grammar and spelling errors, but it doesn't directly lead to a decline in media credit. And the second question. The right answer is D. The number of people choosing to remain single contribute to a rapid increase in household. Third, which media are evolving to a new infomedia that combines the best attributes of them all. The right answer is B. You can find this sentence in page 4. That's all. Thank you.
I'm going to discuss this the last presentation a little bit from perhaps a little bit different perspective. First off, actually, I think probably his questions were the best questions I've ever seen from the students. He had a good set of questions, made you think a little bit if you were reading them. There's some logic involved, like the second question, he had to figure out, okay, how the formula for figuring out penetration, therefore, which of these actually affects penetration, required a little bit of math and logic or something to figure that out. The last question actually brings up the issue that I want to talk about a little bit. And how much time do we have? We're running out of time. Let me just say what I want to say real quickly then. Ideally, and I think he's right, and if the book suggested it, it's right to say that we are coming up with a new type of infomedium that will include the best of text, best of video, best of everything. But I cannot say that newspapers have actually done very well at that. I would say just the opposite, that they are failing because they are not doing that. For example, I think newspapers still think they're supposed to be newspapers. And that, they're newspapers, right? But that's where their failing is that they don't have enough video. There should be, when you send out a reporter, he should be video recording some of his interviews and putting the interview on the online version. In your text version, you're going to have maybe 10 or 15 direct quotes, but you can put up the entire interview along with it. And so the person can now, if they really want to hear if they're very interested in this subject, they can hear the whole interview if they want to. Maybe do a little bit of editing on it, but you wouldn't necessarily take that much time to do the editing, but put the whole video up there. Newspapers could have entire programs. For example, every week, even in a newspaper, a medium-sized newspaper like I worked at, they would have the executive editor, managing editor, and publisher would meet with some special person, some newsmaker, such as the head of the education system in the area, and they would interview him. There might be a reporter in the room also, and the reporter might write a regular story about it. But part of their purpose is that it's an editorial meeting for the newspaper to decide how will they express their opinion about something going on. Like if the school system is asking for higher taxes, will the newspaper recommend that voters approve the higher taxes, or the school board, if the school board is the one that's going to do it. But usually to increase taxes, it involves a public vote. And so what will be the recommendation of the newspaper? So they interview the head of the school system, they talk about it, they argue about it, and then they vote okay, and they tell the editorial writer, okay, you're going to write an editorial. The editorial writer, by the way, may not agree with the decision, but the editorial writer will write an editorial, an opinion piece on behalf of the newspaper supporting the tax increase, let's say. And like I said, the editorial writer may not even agree with it. He may not think they should have a tax increase, but he's hired to write the opinion of the newspaper. So on the opinion page of the newspaper, they run this editorial. Well, all that to say that they had this meeting with this school chief. That could actually be like a TV program. You're interviewing the school chief. You're in a perfect setting, hit the recorder, and that could be like at least a weekly TV show, so to speak. In America, they have Meet the Press and some TV shows like that every Sunday morning. It's a way a newspaper can get into the TV business very easily. They're going to be interviewing this guy anyway. Turn on the camera. There's other things. On a website, you can put entire ebooks on web pages. I have a web page that I have several hundred entire ebooks amounting to tens of thousands of pages. Because on a website, you don't have any limit. It's pretty much infinite how much stuff you can put on your website. And so you can put other stuff there. You can embed the best videos or the most popular videos from YouTube onto your website. The Washington Post owns an online university. What should it be doing with its online university? Put some of that stuff on your website. You have professors working at your online university. Have them create videos about whatever is important, like the impeachment process. People are talking about impeaching President Trump. Well, what happens in the impeachment process? They could have a video from their professor about that and link that to a story that is somewhat related to that, and some story related to Trump, and so forth. They can do a lot more stuff on the internet, so it's not just, one of the terms they use is web first. That means go ahead and put the stories on the web first and keep it current. But you can also have web best. In order for newspapers to survive, they have to make web best, not web first, not just web first, web best, which means people will actually prefer to go to the website, because right now they're not. Most newspaper readers do not go to the website. There are some that do, but the number is very low. Consequently, no advertising is going to the website. And so the typical newspaper is making somewhere around 5% of all their revenues are coming from their website. 5%. And that's it. That's not enough to survive. So the day they close down their presses, they're dead. But meanwhile, they may be going into debt to keep their presses going. So it costs a lot of money to put it to use the press and to deliver by hand to the doorsteps of every subscriber. And so a lot of them are going into debt. The newspaper chain that owned the newspaper, the daily paper that I worked for, is called McClatchy. It was, depending how you measure biggest, it was considered by some to be the biggest newspaper chain in America. And they, for a chapter that just came out in this book that was published last week, I went into their corporate report to see how they were doing. Because I had predicted 15 years ago they had made a really bad mistake when they bought out another major newspaper, Knight Ridder. And they had paid, like, I don't know, the number kept changing. I'm not sure exactly what the final number was, but something like $8 billion for Knight Ridder newspapers at a time when I felt like newspapers were about to take their dive. And I was right. That's almost exactly when the newspapers started taking their dive in advertising. I didn't know it at the time. It was later that we realized that they'd hit their tipping point almost exactly when they bought out Knight Ridder. And I said, you guys are dumb. You guys are dead now. You took on $8 billion worth of debt to buy this other chain of newspapers, and newspapers are going to go dead, or they're going to be replaced. Anyway, so I looked at their annual report, and they were bragging about how much better their online products were doing. They were all the way up to like 8% of their total revenue. 8%, wow. And they lost $30 million last year. In 1 year, they lost $30 million, and they were bragging about increasing their online content by another percentage point or whatever. They're dead. If they don't understand, if they don't start rethinking what they're doing, most of them are basically putting their newspaper on the internet. And they might be thinking web first, but they're not thinking web best. And that's why they're going to die. The TV networks are doing a good job. I say the TV networks in America, the NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, are all going to survive, but their affiliate stations may all die. The local TV stations may die because the prediction in my research is that they have reached their tipping point. The tipping point that the newspapers hit 12 years ago, TV stations hit 2 years ago. So they are into their tipping point where they're going to start losing revenue. And they have also the local stations have not figured out how to get revenue out of their websites. So they're not becoming diverse enough either. They haven't thought web best either. They're thinking web first, not web best also. So the projections are that the newspapers and the local TV stations are going to die. You're going to see a lot fewer news organizations. But they will, exactly what the last question suggested, they will be multimedia. And for you to have jobs, you need to be multimedia journalists, which is what I like about our department here. It is much more multimedia than most departments I've seen. You're getting a lot more video training. Some of you may not like. I know there's a few people who don't like the video. They don't like having as much video. And I'm a print journalist. So I'm telling you this from a print journalist, video may save your jobs. Okay? So you need to understand video. That's the main way for newspapers to survive right now. And one of the areas that the newspapers have not done enough is video advertising. Marketing is at 95% of the marketing executives say video advertising is number one. And yet there's almost no newspaper. I haven't seen a newspaper, maybe the Star does, but most newspapers do not sell video advertising. And yet it's the whole point. To be successful in advertising, you have to do basically what I did 40 years ago, figure out what will help your advertisers, what will help them succeed. If you help them succeed, then they will help you succeed. If you don't, you won't. And so I was able to double my newspaper revenue in 1 year by figuring out what it was they needed to be successful, even though they didn't understand what they needed to be successful. I had to be their advertising consultant, so to speak, in order to help them succeed, and they would then help me succeed. Now, we're in a whole new generation. What I did then isn't enough, but newspapers have to go back to thinking, they have to ask themselves, what do we have to do to help our advertisers succeed? Because if they don't figure that out, then they're gone. They also have to think, who are they competing against? They still think they're competing against each other. And that's a whole bunch of people trying to swarm a sinking lifeboat after the Titanic started going down. They're going to all sink the thing. They'll probably all die because they're all fighting for the last place in that lifeboat with a hole in it. Their competitors are not each other. Their real competitors are Facebook and Google. They have to figure out a way to fight Facebook and Google or they're dead. Because Facebook and Google and other online media, particularly those two, are taking all their advertising away. And they need to understand why they're taking it away. I'm not going to get into that now, but there's very definite reasons why they're taking it away. So how do we fight those, we have first to understand how they're able to steal our advertising, and we have to combat that directly. One of that is that they're multimedia. There's other ways that they're stealing it too, but newspapers will have to my recommendation is they should partner up, and they should create their own Facebook, a news-based Facebook where people could still put in their opinion, but have a stream of news going through. They get to put their own stuff into, even their fake news if they want to, but there's going to be the mainstream, the participants in this Facebook will be putting their news in as soon as they get it. So you have a constant stream of news coming through to help you know what's happening first before anybody else. But go ahead and make it, other than that, make it like Facebook, except you're putting news through, and you have all your participating news media have links along the side or something, so you can go directly to one of those websites or another one. But they have to be able to sell advertising in the same way that Facebook does, or they're unlikely to win, because Facebook has a formula that none of them can compete with right now, unless they do something like that. Okay, there's some stuff that we're running out of time, and I didn't pass the roll. First off, I need to do that, and would you do me a favor and pass one of these out to everybody? I want you to just take a few minutes and try to do copy editing of this sheet that she's going to pass around. I'll get the roll going. And you won't have time to finish it, but I'm going to give you the answer in a few minutes. Actually, we don't have time to do it. I'll have to give you answers right now. Still pass it out so you can take notes, because you need to understand how to do it, and maybe you can check it later. Trying to talk and look at the same time, can't do it. But go ahead and pass it out, and you can take a look at it, but I'm going to give you the answers to it right now, and you might want to just write down the answers if you want to. Okay, I have not passed this around. Do try before you leave to sign any of the weeks you were here, so we are now on week 4. One of the weeks you were not here because we had a holiday, and you can, whichever week that would be whichever week. Okay, let me show you the answers to this, even though you're just barely getting this. Let me just go over this. Okay, so the one question they asked is, why do I put a paragraph mark at the start of every paragraph? You don't have to, technically, if it's a new paragraph, but I put it there. This would not, a professional reporter would not write like this, right? We made a whole bunch of mistakes here, so that it's an exercise. But a real reporter who's going to keep his job is not going to write this badly. And so when I'm doing actual copy editing, I put a paragraph mark at the start of every paragraph, in part because I want to keep track of where I'm at. Somebody's going to distract me, the phone's going to ring, something's going to happen. And so some paragraphs don't have any corrections in them. So I want to remind myself where I'm at. So as I read through and I do my copy edit, and I'm putting the paragraph mark in just to remind myself that where I'm at. The one mistake in this is there should have been a paragraph mark here. This is much too long of a paragraph. And so right in here, there should be that L shape to designate a break in that paragraph. I did not put that down in this version. Okay, so there needed to be a space here under with no, so that little Z sort of formation there. You see, I don't make my tails on the Z maybe as long as AP showed it, but anyway, that's my version. Had to put in a T here and reported, so carried it in the T. The wrong there, this would be a possessive there, their attempt. So THEIR, so slashed out the other form of there and showed the caret to where that this word is supposed to replace it. First should be spelled out, so I just circled that. Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, there's some garbage in there. I slashed and closed, but also 3 lines under the O for ocean, since that's part of the formal name for Atlantic Ocean. The double eagle, the A in eagle should not be capitalized, so just a slash to show that's lowercase. Neoprene was misspelled, and so I had to put in the E in place of whatever the letter was before. Comma after balloon. So there's actually, this is an example of a parenthetical or non-essential clause in here. So the double eagle, comma, a 55-foot neoprene-coated nylon balloon, comma, to end that non-essential phrase, was reported. And then 850, that by AP style is obviously more than 10, so circle it to make it into the number form, the figure. East, again, if it's a region, you capitalize it, but if it's a direction, you don't capitalize it. And this is a direction, 850 miles east of Labrador, so that's clearly a direction, not a region. So slash it to lowercase it. Labrador is proper name, so 3 lines underneath the L for Labrador. Next line, there's a comma here unnecessarily, so slash and close. Sunday afternoon, something in there, an extra N or something needs to be replaced with an O. So carried in the O. Balloonist, there was an E or something that's not needed, so slash and close. Get rid of that extra letter. Levitt needed to be the proper name of one of the, well, it's a ground crew spokesman. 3 lines underneath L for capitalizing Levitt. Again, a ground crew spokesman is parenthetical information, so we set it off with commas, so a comma after Levitt and a comma after spokesman. Spokesman needed a A in there instead of something else. And it's northerly, not northernly, a northerly route, so the N had to come out, so slash and close. Land, I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to see all this from different angles and far back, which is one reason why a lot of, in the other sections, everybody came up towards the front, took pictures of it and everything else. But anyway, so where were we? So land had a transposition problem, D and the N needed to be switched. Needed a space in Great Britain. Another transposition problem with the IAN should be AIN, so transpose the I and the A. 2 periods, one of them had to go, so slash and close, get rid of the periods after Norway. Levitt is misspelled, or one of the Levitts is misspelled. The more typical spelling of Levitt is with 2 T's, so I'll take that one, but in reality, you definitely want to check which spelling is correct. Always take note of, actually, I've noticed that Word actually will designate the second version of a proper name as misspelled if it doesn't agree with the first one. So they've added that to the Word spell check, is if it's spelled 2 ways, it'll show you the second way is wrong, which it may not be true. Maybe the second way may be right. But at least shows you there's an inconsistency in your spelling of a proper name if you used it twice and one spelled differently. But you need to be aware of that and catch that. Very often it happens in names. I catch it a lot when I'm doing my copy editing. People misspell the name. If they've used the name 5 times in a story, they'll misspell it once. Okay, so then down to the word down, touch down, the N needed to be added, so I carried that in. Monday, days of the week are uppercase, so M in Monday, 3 lines under that. T in Tuesday, 3 lines under that. Balloonist needed an extra O, so we carried it in the O. And then again, we have parenthetical phrase here, the balloonist, comma, both from Albuquerque, New Mexico, comma. Meanwhile, New Mexico is with a city, so New Mexico can be abbreviated, so I circled New Mexico. As I mentioned, there's a comma both after balloonist and after New Mexico because that's a parenthetical phrase there. A bunch of garbage. It looks like they tried to correct it themselves on a typewriter or whatever and just close it up. South was misspelled, so I carried it in the T on top of whatever was there. Friday needed to be capitalized, so 3 letters underneath the F. And Friday night, we see in Facebook and stuff, people may spell night, N-I-T-E, but that is not correctly spelled. So I just crossed and closed and just wrote next to it where it had some extra space, the proper spelling of night with a new period after it. Closed in some other garbage there, transposed the I and E in there. Put in an N in sense, carried that in. Seasons are not uppercased. Fall, spring, summer are not uppercased. So slash the F in fall. Crossed out other garbage. And at the end, you see a 30 mark. When we use hard copy, you would put 30 and circle it like this to show that this was the end of the story. Because they were always afraid that if you had a 4-page story, what if one of the pages got lost someplace? So they want to make sure you knew this is the end of the story. So that's traditionally over the decades, if you're doing copy editing, 30 means end of story. You don't need to be looking for another page. Okay, any questions on that? So you have, maybe I'll go ahead and upload that to Moodle so you have that. We're not going to do a lot with hand copy editing, as I said before, but it's important that you understand it. And so that's why I had handed this out for you to do it. If we'd had time, but in this case we didn't have time, but at least you now see the answers and can see whether you would have caught them. It teaches a little bit about both the AP style, which you need to understand, what I circled, what I capitalized, what I didn't capitalize as part of the AP training, and that will be important to you. You will be there probably on your quizzes and a final exam. There will be some questions that relate to AP style, specific AP style rules, the things that I covered this week. That's why I covered it in detail. I read basically every word in that chapter. It's not a long chapter. It's all in my PowerPoint. I made my PowerPoint excessively wordy. I know that, but I read it verbatim pretty much because you need to know that stuff that's in that chapter. It's not long. You need to know it. We will have another presentation on the AP style book. We will emphasize certain things. And we'll have a presentation on the AP punctuation guide. We'll emphasize certain things. But I wanted to make sure you had the most important basics, is what I put in the crash course. Well, just this is the summary of the most important stuff. And you need to know all of it, actually. You should study that somewhat. Like I said, that will be on quizzes and final exams. Obviously not everything, but some of that stuff. Also, I may also have I may refer to, what does it mean? There may be a question, what does it mean when you put 3 lines underneath a letter? So you need to understand this stuff enough that you'll get some questions like this on your next quiz, probably, and then the final exam. What does it mean when you put a slash through a letter? So this isn't real hard. You should understand the basics of this. I'm not going to try to be tricky with it, but you don't know when at some point you may have to use actual hand copy editing. So you should, I need to give you motivation to look at it and try to remember the basics of hand copy editing. Even though the rest of the semester we won't be emphasizing it very much, you'll get it in a quiz, you'll get some of it in the final exam, so don't ignore it. But now we're going to go to the electronic. We're going to start designing pages next week and start learning how to use Quark Express. I hope we have it all loaded onto the computers by next week. If not, we'll probably put a 1-week trial version on all the computers, and we'll start. And you would be able to download. By the way, I downloaded a trial version, a 1-week trial version to this computer, and it works fine. I needed to test to see whether I thought your computers might be able to handle the Quark Express desktop publishing. Is a fairly intensive program. It does take a lot of memory, but as long as you have room on your computer, we will probably make it available that all of you can download a copy of Quark Express onto your computers. We're buying 1,000 licenses, which is way more than we need. And so for the next 5 years or so, students will be able to get a copy of Quark Express and use it. And I suggest you do. Once you learn it, you'll see how nice it is. You're able to make something look very professional, because that is what professional, that's what I used to use at the daily newspaper I was at. We went ahead and went with Quark Express. It is just as good as InDesign. InDesign has captured the market, but the reason why they're giving us cheap copies, Quark Express, is that that's what Adobe did to them 20 years ago or 30 years ago. They started giving universities cheap copies of PageMaker, which was the InDesign predecessor. And so that helped InDesign, or helped Adobe grab the market. So now basically Quark Express is trying to flip the scenario on them, and they're giving cheap copies to universities, and so that you can help retake some of the market for Quark, because it's every bit as good, maybe even better in some ways. So it's a very high quality desktop publishing system. You'll be very fortunate to have a copy of it on your computer. You should keep it. It's very valuable. You may need it in the future. So you don't never know. Okay, well, we're past time. So please do sign the roll, hopefully, before you leave. And we will see you. Oh, the other thing that I should remind you of, your story is due this week. We don't have a quiz this week. Your story is due this week. Previously, you gave us 3 story ideas in week 2 or 3, whenever that was. So you gave us 3 story ideas, and you should have chosen one of those now and started working on it. Monday morning is your deadline for your story. Between 600 and 1,000 words, at least 3 sources, real sources. The stories do not have to be about Xiamen, but they have to be of interest to Xiamen students and faculty. So it could, in the example I put on Moodle, when I uploaded the assignment, it could be, for example, in fact, there's breaking news today that maybe the negotiations with North Korea are going to fall through. Anyway, the relationship between the 2 Koreas and America may have some interest to Xiamen students. So you're not going to write it from you're not going to write the same thing. You're not going to give me your opinions. You're not going to give me anything like that. But you could interview Xiamen students and Xiamen professors. There are professors who would have educated perspectives on it. American professors would have American perspectives on it. Chinese professors would have a Chinese perspective on it. And so that's just an example. So you could take a national story, an international story, and make it relevant to Xiamen. So your stories do not have to be about Xiamen, but they have to be relevant to Xiamen in somehow. And so 3 sources, you need photos. I've made it so you can upload up to 10 files to Moodle. One obviously would be your story, but you could have up to 9 photos also if you wanted to. If you had trouble deciding which were your best photos, you took a bunch of photos, you upload 9 of them, that's fine. You have 10, you upload up to 10 files into Moodle by Monday morning at 9 a.m. So hopefully you've already been doing a little bit of work on this. Like I said, you were thinking about 3 stories if you did that assignment. And so now it's time to do it. This is a major project, so this is 9 percentage points of your 100. So this is important to do this. And these are the stories we're going to be putting into our news, starting next week when we start doing desktop publishing. As soon as I can organize them, we'll start using your stories in your next major project will be to edit and design a magazine. And so you'll each be given a different set of stories. You will not have the same stories. You will have a different set of stories, and you will be creating new magazine formatted news magazine, I guess, because you have news type stories. Some will be more feature oriented. That's fine too. We mentioned about maybe a feature story about a professor, but you do need more than you need at least 3 sources. So interview the professor, interview a student, interview his boss, his chairman, whatever. So some of them can be more feature-ish, some will be a little bit more news-ish, but they should be timeless in the sense of not being dated. You don't write a story about the election results per se. You can mention the election results and then interview people about how they think this happened or what the impact will be on Malaysia, whatever. So again, you don't try not to tie it. Don't write about an event. Write about issues. If you're going to write about something like that, write about the issues, not about the event. Make it timeless so it's still relevant when people read it in July or something. So, okay, any questions on that? Like I said, past time, please sign the roll, and then you can take off. Have a good day.